All right. So today's video, what I want to talk about was growing up in the beach cities for gang members. I grew up in the beach cities. I grew up in Redondo and Lawndale and Inglewood. Inglewood is not really a beach city, but if you go down Inglewood Avenue to Imperial, make a right, you hit the beach. It's like from my grandmother's house, about 10 minutes to the beach. Most of my family was from Redondo, so I grew up over there, and they had their neighborhoods right there, in Redondo and in Lawndale, Torrance. Torrance is another beach city that you know Torrance Beach was just south of Redondo. That was mainly like a white neighborhood. A lot of people that had money lived there. So nobody really hung out there too much. Most of us from you know I would say Lawndale area, Gardena, Redondo. Um, we would all the neighborhoods in that area. We go to like Redondo Beach. We wouldn't hang out in Torrance. I don't even think the guys from Torrance really hung out at Torrance Beach. It was just it was a more of a rich beach area. Redondo had their money too, right there by the beach, but there was a lot of Chicanos that lived right there by the beach. It was a big Chicano neighborhood community. Torrance Beach wasn't like that. The Chicanos were more inland, by Lomita and Carson area. Not so much the beach in PV. Then you had the guys from like San Pedro, Wilmington, Long Beach. They had their area where they would hang out. Their beach areas. They really didn't come over to the South Bay. It was considered the South Bay. Um, Sometimes we go down and over to Imperial Beach and hang out over there. But the thing about growing up and gang banging by the beach cities is, I kind of look at it as how it was for a black dude or a white dude that was from a Mexican neighborhood. They had to prove themselves more than what we did. They had to prove their worth to us more than we did. Well, growing up in the beach cities, or the Chicanos that grew up in those areas, it was like we were trying to prove ourselves to the outsiders, which was the guys from Compton area, South Central, South LA. Even the guys from as far as East LA and all those areas, San Fernando, they kind of looked at us like if we were white and we were rich and we grew up with money because we grew up by the beach, and I was the furthest from the truth. There was poor communities there, or lower middle class, but none of us were rich. Our families lived check to check, but we had to kind of prove ourselves more than what them guys did, because they grew up in the ghettos. They grew up in Compton and Watts and South Central and South LA. It was the ghetto. San Fernando. A lot of San Fernando was fucking ghetto. Not the Encino area and Sherman Oaks, but you go into Pacoima and Vineland and all those areas. It's pretty shitty out there. It's pretty ghetto out there. Um, but they always thought of us as like we were white. And I remember being locked when I was locked up, and we ran with our own area. So I ran with guys from the Harbor area. SGV ran with SGV, San Fernando, San Fernando. And I remember they used to fucking clown on us sometimes. When we come out and we'd be out in the yard. Sometimes they would clown on us. You know what I mean? Like, oh, here comes the Beach Boys. Because we grew up by the beach. So it was all just, they weren't being disrespectful. It was just for them, like, kind of clowning on us. And we fuck with them too. Dudes from East LA and South Central and shit. It's like, yeah, well, they would clown us for call us the Beach Boys. We grew up by the beach, and we say, well, we clown them saying, well, you grew up selling fucking fruit by the freeway. It was just it was all a lot of fun, fucking with each other. Now, if there was a dude from Orange County around, or there was guys from Orange County right there, then we would get on the guys from Orange County because they were beach city people too. They were beach city neighborhoods over there. Not so much on like Laguna and Costa Mesa. I mean, I don't know if they have gangs in Costa Mesa or Newport or Huntington. I mean, they might. I don't know, but I always thought of that as the rich white area. As you keep going along the coast there, it's more inland. Santana and all those areas, Fullerton and Buena Park. But we still would clown the Orange County guys. People were clowning us. We'd jump onto the Orange County guys and make fun of them, like, oh, we're from Laguna and shit like that. So then everybody would turn their attention to fucking with the guys from Orange County. But like I said, it was all just, clowning on each other. But we used to have to prove ourselves. The thing about the guys from the harbor area, it's like we were real protective of the harbor area. And I know my neighborhood was, and I know some other neighborhoods like Gardena, they were the beginning of the harbor. There was a sign, and I think it was somewhere in Gardena where it says Harbor Gateway. That's how you knew where the harbor area started, was in Gardena. So we were like real protective of the harbor. We didn't like nobody coming into the harbor that wasn't from there. When I was younger and I was going to high school, a guy from Drifters ended up at our school. And we made sure that same day that he never came back again. We was like, you're a long way from home. I think Drifters is over in West LA somewhere. And we were just like, you're a long way from home. And, shit happened and we made sure that he never came back to the school again. We didn't want him there. We were protective of the harbor because we used to get shit on so much. We had to, when on the street, we had to go the extra when we were doing things we were doing because we wanted to gain the reputation of how they looked at the guys from like East LA and South Central. We didn't want to be looked at as like the rich gang members and shit. You know what I mean? And that they used to, fucking make fun of us like we were white and shit. You know what I mean? Like we were the white boys or something. Like I said, the surfers. And the funny thing was that along the beach cities, I think the most notorious and infamous of the beach city neighborhoods was got to be Venice. Them guys took that shit to a whole nother level. Them guys some of them were fucking surfers. They were surfers during the day and gang members at night. There's a picture going around on IG that I saw not too long ago. It's an old picture of some guys from Venice. And they're in an alley. It's all tagged up and there's a 64 Impala and they're in front of this car and one of them's kneeling down and he's not holding the shotgun. He's holding a fucking surfboard. And these other dudes are all their shirts off, have Venice on their stomach and shit, They were gangsters. But these fucking guys hung out at the beach. They were a beach city neighborhood. And even the white boys over there, the guys from like Dogtown and the Z Boys, a lot of them guys dressed like cholos. They wore khakis, Vans, flannels, and fedoras. They weren't gang members, but they dressed like gang members. They dressed like the dudes from Venice, and they used to be around those guys from Venice. And I'm pretty sure back in the 70s and early 80s, there was dudes from Redondo that knew how to surf, but they were also gang members because they were a beach city. You know what I mean? I knew dudes that were from my neighborhood that were skateboarders. They dressed like those guys from Venice, the Z Boys like that, with the cut off khakis and the flannels and shit. And they were like really good at skateboarding. They would do half pipes and shit like that, but they were fucking gang members. So we grew up a little bit different than the other guys outside of the harbor. You know what I mean? I don't really know too much of how the dudes in Long Beach did things. I know the guys from San Pedro and stuff. There was guys from San Pedro too that were the same way. They grew up by the beach. Some of them guys probably knew how to surf. Same thing with the dudes from like Wilmington area. And one thing when I was talking to this dude Dubs, he grew up in Santa Barbara, which is a really nice fucking beach city, but they have a couple neighborhoods right there. And I remember telling him, like, dude, like, when we could be fishing off the pier in the morning, catching some bonita or something, and later on at night we're out in the street gangbang. On the street we're out looking for our enemies and shit. But during the day we're fishing. Or we'd be on a boat, we catch a boat right there out of Redondo and go fishing. Come back at the end of the day, go home, maybe eat some fish that we caught, get dressed, and hit the street and start gangbang. That's how we grew up in the beach city. I grew up knowing how to body surf and boogie board because I was always at the fucking beach. I was always at Redondo at the Horseshoe, watching the surfers and out there body surfing or boogie boarding with my friends. Or if we didn't want to have problems, because if we went to Redondo, there was always problems. We'd always fucking find the dudes from Redondo there. They patrolled that fucking that pier, that's their neighborhood, but they patrolled it. They were there all the time. But we would still go down there if we wanted to look for trouble. We'd go down there, but we go down there to go lay on the beach, and we'd be out there. We wouldn't be out there in swim trunks. We'd be out there with cut off dickies. Now, if we wanted a little bit of peace and quiet, and we didn't want to deal with that bullshit, then we head on over to Hermosa or Manhattan, and we'd hang out there. And I think it's Hermosa. It's either Hermosa or Manhattan is like well known for volleyball, beach volleyball. They have a big thing they got going on every year over there at either Hermosa or Manhattan. I think it's Manhattan, where all the best volleyball players in the world come and they play there. And Manhattan and Hermosa was more like a white beach area. There was no neighborhoods over there, so we would go over there and hang out, and to get away from the problems. If we were looking for trouble, we go to Redondo. If we wanted just to go to the beach and hang out, we go to Hermosa or Manhattan. Sometimes we go to Torrance Beach, but we really didn't like going over because the cops would fuck with us. If they see us out there, they would be trying to kick us off the beach. And we just have to walk down a little bit and go onto the Redondo side. Then there was, we go down to Imperial Beach, which is the Imperial Highway until it ends at Dockweiler State Beach. We called it Imperial Beach though. And that was another place that was just known for fucking gang shit going on. You got the guys from Lenox, Inglewood, Gardena, South Los, people from the South Bay, Compton. You had so many neighborhoods that would be down there. And it was guaranteed you go down there, you better go with a gun and a blade or something. You better have something and a bunch of people with you. Because if not, you're going to get the shit kicked out of you over there. So there's always problems there all the time on the weekends. And somewhere, I think in the late 80s and the early 90s, the Bloods and the Crips kind of took that over. And I think it was in the 90s, that's when I went down there. When I got out, I went down there, and it was just like all Bloods and Crips there. And this is during the time when you can tell who was a gang member and who wasn't. Everybody's wearing blue or red. If it was the Chicanos there, they were in their cut-off khakis and their hide socks and shit, tank tops, no shirts on, all blasted, And but somewhere in the late 80s and then the early 90s is when the Bloods and Crips took over that spot. So, we just went to Redondo or Hermosa or Manhattan. But like I said, growing up over there was a lot different. Growing up in the beach cities, we were real protective over the South Bay and the harbor. We didn't like outsiders coming in there. And there was a lot of fucking neighborhoods there. Like I said, the harbor started from Gardena, Lawndale, Redondo, and pushed its way south. So you had Torrance, Lomita, Wilmington, Dominguez, Long Beach, San Pedro. Who else? Harbor City. These are all neighborhoods of the harbor, and there was a lot of gangs there. Not really that big of an area, but I think it was in the 93. Shit really got bad in the harbor. And I remember we ended up coming out in the newspaper in the Daily Breeze. They were talking about the gangs right there in the South Bay, which is Lawndale, Redondo, Gardena. How it gotten so bad out there that they were comparing it to the neighborhoods in East LA. And we were proud of that. We were proud of that when that came out in the newspaper, when they were saying like these guys from the South Bay, they're just as vicious as the guys over in East LA area. You know, people were dropping like flies in the harbor area during that time. It's not something that I'm trying to glorify. I'm just saying that's the way it was back in the early '90s. You know, people were getting killed out there all the time. And I think we finally got the recognition that we had been looking for a long time. We were a lot of us were tired of hearing that shit that we were, you know, like white. We grew up on the beach. We grew up rich, and that was not true. You know, we did have different. We did have a lot of us did have two upbringings. You know, like myself and a lot of guys that I knew from Redondo and Lawndale and Gardena, and even over in the Torrance area, we did have two different lives. Like myself, I grew up in the Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Weeblos, Tiger Cubs. I did all that shit. I would go camping with them, fishing with them. I had a paper route for the Daily Breeze newspaper. I started at 11 years old, and I was doing that. I played Pop Warner, which a lot of guys did. Played baseball or Little League, which a lot of us did. We all knew each other from that stuff. We used to go ice skating and shit. The newspaper would take us go ice skating over in Torrance. Again, we grew up at the beach. A lot of us surfing or boogie boarding, body surfing, fishing. A lot of us knew how to fish. But in the evening, it was something different. We'd take off those clothes. We put on the other uniform, the street uniforms that we wore, khakis, Pendletons, and all that shit, and we hit the fucking streets at night. It's funny because even a lot of us, like, we have khakis on, or khaki shorts, long socks, the Nike Cortez, and a OP shirt on, a white OP shirt, or a white Town and Country shirt on, or a white Jimmy's shirt on. We wore the surfing gear, body glove and shit, like white body glove shirts that had the body glove logo on them, had a body glove logo on the back. Creased up. You know, we grew up by the beach. We were proud of that. We were proud of living by the beach. And it showed in the things that we wore. Even though, you might have a Town and Country shirt on, it was big, it was creased up, you had on with khakis. You could tell, if you came from the outside area, you could tell, like, oh, these guys are from the beach. You know what I mean? We wore Vans. A lot of us wore white Vans. We also wore the white Nike Cortez, but a lot of us wore white Vans or black Vans, but mainly white Vans, no slip-ons, the tie the laced ones. So you could tell guys from the South Bay or the harbor because they were wearing white Vans or they would wear surfer type t-shirts. Even the hats. Some of the guys used to wear the hats. But that was a life for us in the harbor, in the South Bay, growing up in the beach cities. Like I said, we had two different lifestyles. We had the average everyday kid in the beach area lifestyle with the surfing, body surfing and all that shit and fishing. Then we had at night, the gang lifestyle. But, one thing about the guys that grew up in the harbor area, and I know people from East LA and San Gabriel, they're proud of where they're from. But like, we were just really, really proud of being from the harbor. It was like growing up in the harbor was like growing up nowhere else because we had so much shit that we could do. We weren't stuck inland like the other guys, in South Central and all that shit. we had a lot of shit that we could do right there in the harbor. And so that's what it was like for us growing up in the beach cities. And I'm pretty sure it was the same thing for the guys that were in Orange County area. Um, Again, Santa Monica, Venice, they're not part of the harbor. They're West LA. But again, Venice took that shit to a whole nother level. And I think even Santa Monica might have had the same thing. Some guys out there from Santa Monica that were the same way the guys from Venice were. They grew up at the beach and they probably knew how to surf, fish, body surf, and all that other shit. But at night, it was something different. It was, notorious neighborhoods, Venice, Culver City, and Santa Monica. But it was the same thing over with us in the harbor. So it was like they looked at us like we were less than them, but we had to be worse than them. We had to really prove a fucking point growing by the beach. So, anyways, that's what it's like. That was what it was like growing up in the beach cities in the harbor area in the South Bay for a guy that was a gang member, for the gang members that grew up out there. That's what it was like for us. And we were proud of being from the harbor, from the harbor area.